It's my honor. Let me, I'm going to put it where I can see everybody. Yeah, don't hide. If you're here, I definitely don't turn your camera off. I want to see who I'm talking to. There we go. I see people popping up. Yeah, good to see each of you. So proud. You all can see me,
We're so
okay?
proud of you. Yes.
Great.
Okay. I think a couple more people might filter in, but we can maybe get started.
Yeah, I'm ready when you are.
Perfect. Hi, everyone. Thank you all for being here. I'm trying not to exude my excitement too much, but I'm really excited to see all of you. I'm Sanat. I'm the Finance Director of the SMU Human Rights Council, and I'm so excited for today's event. Thank you, Shaun, for being here and accepting our invitation. We really appreciate it more than I can put into words. And I'd like to introduce you to Tana, our Administrative Director.
Hi, yes, as she said, my name is Tana Opliger. I'm the Administrative Director of the Human Rights Council. Just to give you a little bit of background about what that is, the Human Rights Council is the student board of the SMU Human Rights program, of which all these students are a part. So the Human Rights Council organizes community building and advocacy events for SMU students and sometimes members of the larger Dallas community. And recently, students in our program have expressed a lot of interest in having speakers come to share about their work in social justice. So we were just so thrilled to learn that you were willing to come share with us, and on such short notice especially. So thank you so much for being here. And Sanaa is going to tell you a little bit more about the SMU Human Rights program before we get started with our conversation.
Thank you, Tana. So the SMU Human Rights Program is educating a new generation of visionary change makers to defend and demand human dignity. It all started in 2006, and since then, the program has permanently altered the culture of SMU. SMU is historically known for its wealth and privilege, and the Human Rights Program has worked to redefine the campus as a defender of justice and diversity. The program has called on SMU and the world to recognize human rights as a legitimate field of study, and we are only one of 7 programs in the United States to grant a bachelor's degree in human rights, and I believe we're the only program in the South to offer that to our students. We offer over 100 academic courses in human rights, including gender and human rights, the struggle for human rights, the politics and legacies of the civil rights movement, and ethics and human rights. The program's philosophy of human rights education incorporates 3 basic commitments. First, special attention is paid to the perspectives of oppressed communities. Second, practical applications of knowledge are emphasized across the curriculum. And third, creative projects are promoted as valid forms of cultural criticism and social activism. And now that I've shared some information about our program, I'd like to introduce you all to our guest, Shaun King. Shaun King is an American writer, civil rights activist, and he uses his social media to promote social justice causes, including the Black Lives Matter movement. I can go on and on about Shaun's biography and his accomplishments as a social justice activist, but I'd like to truly give our time to him and allow him to address our phenomenal graduating seniors. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce you all to Shaun King.
Hello, it's so good to see each and every one of you. I'm incredibly proud of each of you, not only for getting through this program, which is a phenomenal program, and I would have done anything when I was in undergrad to have a degree in human rights. My undergraduate degree and graduate degrees are actually in history. I think had I had an option, I would have chosen human rights. It just wasn't something that was available, but that you all have that level of training and expertise and the guidance that you've received. I'm excited for each of you to get out into the world. And there are a few lessons that I want to share because I think there are some big decisions that you have to make here in the weeks and months ahead. And I know many of you had plans that have been dashed and plans that you've had to change over these past few weeks and months. Many of you maybe even lost loved ones to the coronavirus or have extended family or friends that you've lost during this time. Maybe you've had family or friends who've lost their jobs, or maybe even you've lost a job or a job prospect. And I do just want to start there and let you know that that I'm standing with you, that I care, and if there's any way that I can support any of you in particular, please let me know and let your staff know, and I'd be glad to do it. I've been trying my best to support so many families through this pandemic. This is probably over the past few weeks, I've done eulogies for funerals and prayers for funerals all over the country. And some of that is because I've tried to make up in my mind every single day, no matter what's going on, no matter how frustrated I am, that I'm going to try to leave the world today just a little better than I left it yesterday and the day before. And so I try to find any opportunity I can to make a real practical, tangible impact in somebody's life. And so you may not do what I do, but what I want to talk about for a few minutes is something that I have a whole chapter in my book. I had a book that was supposed to come out in April, and almost every bookstore in the country has been closed. And so we pushed it all the way forward to August. But there's a chapter in the book where I tell a story about a time where I went to Bates College in Maine, and I was teaching a group of young students who were a part actually of a human rights training program there at Bates. And I told the students that I thought it was the best thing they could do if they chose one primary issue to fight for, one primary cause to fight for, and to put their feet down, make up in their mind that they were going to fight for change on this one issue and fight for it until they got it. And I had a young woman who came up to me after I spoke, and she was a young African student, and she came up to me with several of her friends, and she had on a full hijab, and she told me, she said, "Shaun, I love what you said about picking one issue," but she said, "I'm a Black woman in America. I'm a woman in America. I am an African immigrant in America from a country that's on Trump's ban list. I am a Muslim in America." And she listed for me 5 or 6 things. And she said, "How can I only care about one thing?" And I had sympathy for her, because in that moment I realized that of all the things that she said could cause her struggle in this country, most of those things I don't face and I don't deal with. And what I said to her is what I really want to say to each of you is, I'm not saying that you can only care about one thing. And for any of you who follow me or see what I do, I care about so many different issues. I care about the environment. I care about children. I'm a father of 5 children from elementary school, middle school, high school, and college. I care about healthcare and Medicare for all and universal healthcare. I care about economic opportunity. I care about many different things, but it's difficult, and I have found it almost impossible to fight 5 battles, 10 battles. I care maybe about 100 different issues on some level or another. I can't fight 100 battles. I have found in all of my years of fighting for human rights and civil rights, I have found that I can typically only fight 1 or 2 battles effectively. And what I want to throw back at each of you is something that I have tested. I have now traveled to 47 states over the past few years to speak on college campuses all over the country. And one of the questions that I've asked college students that I think gets to the heart of it is, what is the one problem in the world that breaks your heart? And for me, that problem is some extension of mass incarceration and police brutality. And so if you see me on any given day, I'm fighting for people who've been affected by mass incarceration and police brutality. If you go to my Instagram right now, we're fighting for a young woman named Breonna Taylor, who was shot and killed by police in her home 2 months ago today in Louisville, Kentucky. I'm fighting for Breonna, though, because I made a decision that I would fight for people who were impacted by police brutality and mass incarceration. And when I put my feet down and decided that that was going to be the thing that I made a difference on, it gave me a level of clarity that I didn't have until I made that decision. And here's what I found. It's actually painful to make that decision, because for me to decide that I'm not just going to help cases, but I'm actually trying to shift systems. I lead an organization called Real Justice, and we help elect district attorneys all over the country. We've helped to elect district attorneys in San Francisco, Boston, St. Louis, in Dallas and San Antonio, and all over the country. We've ousted some horrible district attorneys. Well, because I made a decision on what I would focus on, it also means there's some things I can't focus on. And what I have found, and my assumption is that all of you have huge hearts for helping people who are hurting. I found that I had a hard time deciding to really zero in and focus on the one issue that I wanted to change in the world, because I cared about so many. But in some ways, and I unpack this in a whole chapter in my book, I found that it's an excuse that we tell ourselves sometimes that gives ourselves permission, where we do a little bit, just a very little bit, about a whole lot of issues. And that's not terrible, but it's not particularly effective. And my hope is that each of you, with the training you have and the expertise that you're going to leave the university with, that you will actually be able to see tangible, measurable, systemic change in an issue that you care about. And what I have found that will help you determine what that issue could be, and it could change. Your issue probably won't be my issue. Your issue should be something that is personal to you. Is what's the thing that breaks your heart? What's the thing that causes you to grieve? I know some people, that's the environment. I have a friend named Glenn. For him, it's the rights of animals. Well, I like animals, but that's not my issue. I'm glad, though, that it's his issue. And what I've tried to do is I fight to 100% of my capacity every day on the issue that I've chosen. And then what I try to do is to amplify and support and encourage people who've chosen another issue of their own. So I amplify the other people who said, you know what, my issue is the environment. You know what, my issue is healthcare. You know what, my issue is Islamophobia. My issue is women's rights. And so whatever other people have chosen, I try to find the people that have made their own decision in their own issue and support them, encourage them, donate to them, send them encouraging notes, amplify their messages. And that's what I hope for each of you. Now, over these next few years, you may have to tinker, you may have to experiment, but my hope is that you'll eventually take a deep dive with your life into the issue that you care about. And other people may not initially understand it, but once you make that issue, once you make that decision on the issue, you'll find a tribe, you'll find a community, you'll build bonds and friendships and relationships of people that can support you. And I'd love, as we get a chance to talk here for a few minutes, if you have any questions about making that decision, or if you have any questions on what may be next for you or some decisions that you're hoping to make, feel free to ask. And if you have any questions about the cases that I'm working on now with Ahmaud Arbery or Breonna Taylor or anything else, I'd love to answer your questions on that or anything else that you may be considering. All right? Yeah, thank you. And if you have any questions about that advice, feel free to ask. Could you all hear me okay?
Yes. Thank
Good,
you.
perfect. Yeah.
We actually compiled a list of questions.
Oh, great.
our seniors, and many of them were related to the Ahmaud Arbery case and the Breonna Taylor case. Our main one is, what advice do you have for student activists who feel especially helpless during this time as we see these cases circulating? And how do you measure progress? I think when we think about Ahmaud Arbery, we thought that we had a small victory with the arrests, and then we see another video pop up, and it seems to be a pattern that seems to have no end.
Yeah.
So how do you measure progress, and what can students do during this time?
Well, I would love, if you all get a chance to see, but from kind of an academic lens, if you get a chance to go to runwithmod.com, we built that platform in partnership with Ahmaud's mother, Wanda, and their attorney, Lee Merritt, who lives and works in Dallas. And I have that first initial feeling some days of helplessness myself, but I try to, as quick as I can, pivot away from just feeling overwhelmed, angry. In the case of what happened to Ahmaud, on some days I just found myself even full of rage over what happened. And what I do, even just for my own self-care, is I try to give people clear action steps they can take. And so if you go to runwithmod.com just to study it and understand it, it looks really simple, but it's actually behind what you see is actually really complex. We built a really complex phone dialing system that would call public officials all over the country who could do something about the case. We built what we call, it's really one of the first things of its kind. We built a super petition where when you fill out the petition, normally it either goes to one person or it's just a database. But that petition, over 1.5 million people filled out our petition. It then emailed 25 different people every time someone filled it out. So we sent 26 million emails to the FBI, to the state police, to the district attorney. I mean, just a staggering volume of information. And all of that had something to do with some of the action steps that we took. So just quickly, we demanded that there be an independent prosecutor. Well, now there's an independent prosecutor. We are only 70% or so pleased with who they chose, but we are significantly pleased that she is an upgrade from what they had. And often in this work, you don't get 100% of what you're asking for, and you learn not to settle, but you learn to accept a victory when you have it. We were pushing for the arrest of 3 men. Well, 2 men have been arrested and charged. We asked for there to be an investigation into misconduct into the police and prosecutors departments, and there is now an investigation into those departments. So we tried to create tangible, measurable actions that people could call for, and now we are measuring them. And 3 of the 5 things that we initially called for have happened. Now, it took millions of us to fight for it, which is an extreme amount of pressure, and we can't always duplicate that. But we also did one other thing that I would encourage you to do, and many of you may have participated. We created runs all over the country where people could get out of the home and take a jog or a run or a walk. And Ahmaud Arbery was a runner, and we wanted to honor him because last weekend was his birthday and he was born on Mother's Day, and this was his mother's first time on Mother's Day without him. But what we were really trying to do was give people who couldn't really protest the way that they wanted because of quarantine and the pandemic, we wanted to give people a chance to use their body in a way that felt like some type of solidarity and protest. We were also trying to give people an outlet because I could see the rage building. Like I felt it even in my own heart. And we just wanted to give people something actionable that they could do. We just launched about 3 hours ago a new campaign with the family of Breonna Taylor, who was killed 2 months ago today. And if you go to standwithbree.com, we'd love for all of you to take those actions, But as young scholars yourself, I'd like for you to study it and kind of see what we're trying to do. We try to build teams. We try to build a commitment. I hate that we have to do this, but we also go to great lengths to humanize the people that we're fighting for. We shouldn't have to do that. It's actually insulting that that's necessary. But you'll see if you go to standwithbree.com, that's Bree with one E, standwithbre.com. I had an artist create this beautiful collage of Breonna, and I wanted to provide an eclectic mix of pictures of her working. I wanted some pictures of her where she had really fixed herself up for a date. Like I wanted people to see 360 degrees of her humanity, where she had makeup on and her hair was done. She had no makeup on and her hair wasn't done. Like I wanted every type of person who could see that to be like, I know who this type of person is. Well, what we found is that when we're fighting against systems of oppression, they often dehumanize the people that we're fighting for. And that then what we try to do is before they can tear Breonna apart, before they can tear Ahmaud apart, we go out of our way to define for the public who Ahmaud is, who Breonna is. And a lot of your work in human rights really is storytelling. And a lot of what I do is telling a story, because it's hard in this age to compel people to act. There's so much information, and story, image, video, all of those are tools that we use to try to get people to act, for sure.
Thank you for sharing your wisdom with us. The next question that we received in regard to the Ahmaud Arbery case and the video that went viral, a student asks, you often post video footage of brutality as part of your campaign. How do you weigh the importance of generating conversation against the harm these images may cost Black Americans?
It's a horrible conflict. Each case is different. In this case, and I think probably if I have shared over the past 10 years, say 100 videos, I would say 97 or 98 of those times I was working directly with the family and their attorneys. And when we received this video of Ahmaud, and we received it anonymously, when Lee, the attorney for the family, who's my best friend, and we went to college together as well, so we've known each other since we were teenagers. When we first saw it, we both were having to fight back the tears from what we saw. And I mean, it was a really emotional moment. It was as egregious as you would expect, but seeing it was even worse. And we spoke to the family and asked them if we thought that sharing it could put pressure on police and prosecutors and the governor and others to act. If we thought that sharing it would help in that case, would they be okay with us sharing it? And of course they said yes. And it's ridiculous that sharing that video did help. It did. It helped. It helped put the level of pressure and the level of attention and urgency on the case that it needed. But it's horrible that that's the reality. In that moment, Lee and I both, and I think there's a very real critique of this that stands. I did an article with The Guardian last week where they wrote a critique of whether or not it's worth sharing the video. What Lee and I decide is that in that moment, our primary consideration is the family. And if we think this can bring justice for the family, we will do it. But the critique is real. It then also causes a compounded amount of trauma for all of us who then have to see it. And that's true. It is. And that doesn't sit well with me. It's a it's a deal that we make in the moment that helps the family. But and in many cases, Lee and I both have found that sharing a video often provides a family leverage, a negotiating power that they often didn't have before the video was shared. But it is traumatic, and so I don't feel good about it. I feel that it was the right thing in this individual case. I get horrible videos sometimes 20 or 30 times a day, and I probably share, so that's sometimes 100, 150, 200 videos a week of all types of, not just police brutality, but all types of violence. And I share a tiny fraction of those videos, normally only when I think it can somehow hold somebody accountable who is hiding under the privacy of it not being shared. So, and I'm not always right on it, but it's a calculation that we make with the hope that it works, but sometimes it doesn't. That's the most transparent perspective I can give on it.
Thank you. And
Yeah.
if you have time for one more question.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
So I think many students who are going into the social justice sphere are afraid of cancel culture or saying or doing the wrong things. And as a public figure yourself who isn't afraid to speak up, you have dealt with your fair share of controversies about your background and finances. Could you address those issues and offer guidance to young activists on how to deal with such criticism?
Yeah, I have a lot to say about it. So if you have a few minutes, I'll try to give my full perspective. I think first and foremost, and I manage across two different organizations, about 40 employees with the North Star and a group of people that are called the Action Pack. And we have several staff members from Dallas and Fort Worth and from Texas. And we're also building something that we call the Grassroots Law Project. And every day in some conversation with the staff, we all agree that our very best way to answer our critics, who sometimes may have legitimate criticism of a mistake we made or a perspective that they have that they don't really agree with how we did something, we feel there's a huge burden on us to do good work, for the quality of the work that we do. And I mean that from the most minute detail, from checking the grammar and spelling of what we do, to making sure that every link we share works, to making sure that every dollar that we raise is accounted for and spent the way that we said it would be spent. And what we've, like, for instance, with the Action Pack, it's a political organization. And so every quarter we have to file our public filings of all our finances. And we were actually really glad when we started the Action Pack, because people had been so critical of all the fundraising that I had done, that I thought, well, here we'll have quarterly public filings. Nobody checks them and nobody reads them. And still people critique the fundraising that we do and never check the actual fundraising itself. So we just feel a burden still to make sure that those filings are accurate. And I have grown to feel that if I spent a little bit of time every day responding to critics, which is something I used to do, I have found that it ends up not only not necessarily changing their mind, it ends up sometimes serving as an even bigger distraction. And so when I think of some of my favorite people, like one of my heroes is Brian Stevenson. Brian Stevenson literally doesn't even have social media accounts. And if you've read Just Mercy, or if you've seen the movie, or if you know about his work, he is literally not even on social media. And there are many, many critics of Brian, Brian really just hunkers down and does the work. And it doesn't mean that you can't have criticism. I actually had a criticism of Brian a couple months ago on a case that I was frustrated that he didn't take, where somebody ended up receiving the death penalty. But if I wanted to have that beef with Brian, it would have to be person to person. And, you know, when people are frustrated with the work you do, you can't allow it to distract you from actually doing good work. I will say this, though. I try to surround myself with people, including my wife and staff and colleagues, who will tell me the truth about myself from a real critical lens, from something that I say that might be wrong, a perspective I took that might be off. You have to be able to have people around you that will help you grow, help you improve. We have advisors and people who are senior than me who can kind of give me guidance and advice if something gets particularly rough. And then when you make a mistake, you have to acknowledge it and if necessary, apologize. And then if you sincerely, earnestly acknowledge a mistake and apologize for it, like from your heart, and then change the behavior, that's about all you can do. And what I have found is, because I am in the center of so much, not controversy, but so many cases. I was a primary advisor for Ahmaud Arbery's family. I'm a primary advisor now for Breonna Taylor's family. Well, what that also means is that makes me very easy to critique. And I have to be willing to make that trade. And so over these past few years, I am simultaneously an easy target because I'm so visible, helping so many families in so many cases. But that also means I have to be able to endure the challenges that come with it. And it's not easy. And what that also means, just from a pure math perspective, is that when you work on so many cases, sometimes you'll get it wrong. You'll like, there have been times where I fought for somebody that I truly believed was innocent and they were actually guilty. And I believed it, their attorneys believed it, and then later, after fighting for somebody, we learned we were all wrong. And there were people who were really hurt by that. There have been times that, I've put some type of pressure on a case in a way that I later came to regret. I just have to accept that there are times where I'll get it wrong. I have to acknowledge it when I do it and try to pivot and improve and get better wherever I can.
Thank you.
Yeah.
We do have more questions if you have the time, but I want to be mindful of your schedule.
I do. I don't have to go until I have an interview at 3:30 my time. So I have about 15 minutes or so. I'm on the East Coast.
Okay, perfect.
Yep.
I don't think we can leave this conversation without talking about the election, since it is election year. We just wanted to know how you see the importance of voting and whether you sympathize with those who have completely lost faith in the political process, especially in efforts to move our movements forward.
Yeah, I have. I have voted in every presidential election for over 20 years, and I vote in as many local elections as I can. I am old enough to know that voting is not the panacea. It's not a magic pill to every problem that we have. And not only that, but sometimes we ask people to vote like very generically, but we're not providing people with quality options on who to vote for or information on what policy or bill or piece of legislation is up. In Louisville right now, for instance, I'm very frustrated as we work on this case with Breonna Taylor because Louisville has a Democratic mayor. Kentucky just elected a Democratic governor, and they have the district attorney in Louisville as a Democrat. And, we tell everybody, go vote. And people in Kentucky voted, and they voted, particularly almost all communities of color in Kentucky voted almost universally Democratic. And now we're asking just for those Democrats to be responsive, and we're struggling to get them to be responsive. And I said that to say that voting, it doesn't solve every problem. Voting Democrat and even having Democrats win doesn't solve every problem. But I still believe in the power of what voting can do when you leverage it smartly. As I said earlier, our organization, Real Justice, we have now ousted almost 20 horrible district attorneys and replaced them in most cases with deep, deep improvements. People voted to do that. So there's smart things that you can do with voting. Politicians regularly overpromise and underdeliver. I thought that overall, I thought it was a huge mistake and still do. Strategically, I thought, as you may know, I campaigned all over Texas for Bernie Sanders, and not to just advocate, I'm not here to advocate for Bernie, but I thought that Bernie was the better strategic solution because the overwhelming majority of young people supported Bernie, and that youthful energy, I believed, could drive Bernie to easily defeat Donald Trump. And so now the presumed Democratic nominee had less support of young people than virtually any Democrat running. And I hate that that was the choice. Even had it not been Bernie, Joe Biden had less support of the 10 leading Democrats they were 20 Democrats running, but Joe Biden had less support than anyone else in the top 10. And he is the Democratic nominee. And it puts us all in a weird position where most young people would have preferred one of the 9 other choices. And instead we have the 10th. And so what we see is older voters really chose the nominee over younger voters in a lot of ways. I think we have to find ways to get over our frustration. I have friends all the time who say, they won't vote for Joe Biden or they won't vote in a particular election. And politicians have to ask themselves, like, why is that? Why have we rubbed some communities so raw and like burned the candle at both ends for so long that people just feel like, listen, voting doesn't matter. It won't make a difference. We may hear that. Those of us on this Zoom may hear that and be like, no, it makes a difference. But we have to ask ourselves, what has given people that impression? And how do we elect people who can help change that? And it's tricky. I definitely think from the presidential election, I see a path to Trump being defeated, and I see a path to Trump winning. The pandemic has weakened his candidacy, and his response to the pandemic rather has weakened his candidacy. But he's a tricky, nebulous person to run against. And Hillary Clinton, a lot of people believed she would be one of the most difficult people for anybody to run against, and she lost. And so Trump, he's a very difficult person to beat. And in Texas, you all are at ground zero. I don't know if a Democrat can win in Texas. And I know the conversations, this is not just a partisan conversation, but I think Texas is going to be at the center of what happens come November. And I think that's healthy for it to not just be presumed to go to one party or the other. It causes candidates to have to fight for people's votes. We'll see if that happens.
Thank you for sharing your insight and being so transparent with us.
Yep.
Do you have any final piece of advice to our graduating seniors specifically?
Well, I'm I'm rooting for you in every way. I think we are in one of the most difficult times in modern American history. I think that 2020, I'm 40, and so when I was a little kid, I thought that in 2020, I thought like cars would fly, and like I thought it would be like a totally. And now that I'm in 2020, I'm like, yeah, this is definitely not how I imagined 2020. It's a rough, from the brutality we are experiencing to the pandemic to many very painful deaths and losses. It's a hard time. Um, I say that to say to each of you, like, this world, it needs you. It more than ever, this world needs people who are committed for a profession, for a career, for a calling, are committed to human rights. And as difficult as this moment is, I am encouraged to see each of your faces and know that you are going out into this world. You chose this path already understanding that the world had real pain and real problems. And I'm just glad that you're going to be able to lean into those problems. And I hope you never there are days where I get discouraged from the difficulty of the work, but I hope you never get so discouraged that you abandon this calling that you have to do good in the world and make a difference in the world. I found that if you can endure some of the biggest challenges and learn lessons from them, you'll be able to do better work on the other side. So I'm rooting for you. I believe in you. I know your staff and team, they do as well. I hope you all are able to stay connected to one another and encourage each other and check in with each other as well. And I hope if you can, hope you can check out the new campaign that we're building for Breonna Taylor as well and support that. And if you let your staff know, if any of you want to help volunteer on any way with that, let your staff know, and I'll make sure I connect you with our team, and you can kind of see what's going on behind the scenes with that campaign. All right. Yeah. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank
Take
you
care,
so
everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for
Bye,
being
everybody.
generous with your time.
Yeah. Thank you. Take care, everybody.